So you actually survived the opening act. You got out of the city before it finished eating itself. You dodged the first stampede, the temporary roadblocks that became permanent, the charming moment when your neighbor discovered socialism by pointing at your pantry. You've been walking long enough that your feet have their own weather system. Your stomach is doing that hollow, metallic growl that makes you consider crimes you used to judge people for. And then you see it. A dark mouth in the hillside, a cave entrance, cool air breathing out like the planet is offering you a free bunker trial. Or maybe it's not a cave. Maybe it's that perfect little green sanctuary you used to jog through on Sunday mornings, quiet ponds, trimmed grass, benches that used to smell faintly of sunscreen and regret. Or maybe it's a railway tunnel, thick concrete, straight line into the distance, like the last remaining piece of adult supervision in a world that has none. Your brain lights up like a slot machine. Shelter, shade, stability. The word safe crawls up your spine and taps your skull from the inside. And that's the moment you should get worried. Because in a post-collapse world, your instincts are not a guardian angel. They're a legacy app that hasn't been updated since humanity thought the scariest thing in the dark was a wolf with bad intentions. The old world was full of invisible workers doing invisible work. Engineers made underground spaces breathe. Grounds crews sprayed chemicals so the grass would stay green for your photo ops. Inspectors signed papers so you could assume a structure wouldn't drop a ceiling on your head. That whole system is gone. The places still look like the brochure, but the safety part was never the brochure. Safety was the maintenance. Now you're staring at a snapshot of a world that used to be tended, and you're about to treat it like it still is, which is how you become a very confused skeleton in a location that looked extremely reasonable at the time. Here's your uncomfortable principle for the new world. The more inviting a place appears, the more suspicion it deserves. It's not paranoia. It's pattern recognition with a darker sense of humor. In the past, nice-looking usually meant actively managed by an economy. Today, nice-looking often means quietly hazardous and no longer being mitigated. Your ancestors learned which berries were poisoned by the traditional method, watching someone eat them and then rapidly regretting being alive. Their instincts were trained in forests, open plains, and rivers that hadn't been treated like industrial runoff sinks. Nobody in your bloodline had to evaluate a golf course as a chemical dumping ground. Nobody had to think about a tunnel as a physics-powered smoke cannon. Nobody grew up with radon warnings on real estate listings and the comforting knowledge that a fan could solve it. You did. And now, you don't have the fan, the inspector, or the hospital. So we update the software, we replace feels safe with is safe. We start asking the questions your instincts can't even spell. What accumulates here? What breeds here? What off-gases here? And what kills you slowly enough that you'll blame stress instead of the environment? Let's start with the trap that seems the most ancient and therefore the most comforting, the cave. A cave looks like the original shelter. Stone walls, constant temperature, defensible choke point. Your inner caveman starts humming a lullaby. On paper, caves are attractive because they offer stability. Out of the wind, out of the rain, out of sight. The temperature stays steady, usually around the range your body can tolerate without immediately complaining. You can see the tactical fantasy forming in your mind. Fire near the entrance, sleeping deeper inside, gear arranged like a museum exhibit titled "Person Who Has It Together." And that's how caves sell you the lie. They feel like shelter because they are shelter from the things you can see. The killers in caves are the things you can't. The first one is radon. You've heard of it in the old world the way you heard of termites, or mercury technically Sirius, usually someone else's problem. Radon is a radioactive gas produced by uranium decay in rock and soil. It has been leaking out of the earth since before humans learned the difference between food and rocks. Outside, it disperses. Inside enclosed spaces, it builds up. And caves are basically enclosed space as a lifestyle. Here's the insult. Radon is heavy. It doesn't politely float away like your hopes. It sinks. It pools in low areas, the exact spots you'd choose for camp, because they're flat, sheltered, and convenient. So you're not just walking into a cave. You're walking into a bathtub of radioactive gas and thinking, nice, there's room for my sleeping bag. In the old world, radon exposure was a major cause of lung cancer for non-smokers. People could mitigate it. They could test it. They could install ventilation. They could get diagnosed early, treated, monitored. In your world, You don't have tests, fans, imaging, chemo, or a doctor who will take you seriously when you say, "I've been sleeping in a rock hole for 3 months and now breathing feels optional." You won't feel radon. It's odorless and invisible. It won't burn your throat. It won't announce itself. It will just patiently damage your cells until your body starts losing arguments with itself. And then the cave adds the second killer, because caves don't do single threats. Caves do bundles. Bats? Lovely creatures, great for mosquito control, horrifying as roommates. If you see signs of a bat calling guano piles, ammonia-like smell, squeaking above you, understand you're not looking at wildlife. You're looking at a spore factory. There's a fungus called Histoplasma capsulatum that thrives in soil enriched by bat and bird droppings. In a normal outdoor environment, it may exist at low levels. In a cave with long-term bat habitation, it can be everywhere. The spores become airborne when the ground is disturbed, which is a fun detail because your entire plan involves walking, setting down gear, clearing a spot, sweeping, and generally turning undisturbed into aerosol. You breathe in those spores, and best case, you get a flu-like illness. Worst case, especially if you're exhausted, malnourished, or already sick, it spreads beyond your lungs and starts attacking organs you would prefer to keep operational. The nightmare feature is the delay. Incubation can take days to weeks. So you feel fine while the infection gets comfortable. You settle in, unpack emotionally, maybe even start naming parts of the cave like it's an apartment. Then, the fever comes. The cough starts. Your energy collapses. And now you're too weak to hike out to a better location? The shelter didn't protect you. The shelter waited until you were committed. But I'll make a fire, you think. Of course you will. Humans see darkness and immediately decide to introduce combustion. Fire gives heat and light, two things caves deny you. But caves also have a habit of poor ventilation. Smoke accumulates. Carbon monoxide accumulates. You get headache, dizziness, confusion symptoms that in a collapse you will absolutely interpret as, "I'm just tired and stressed," right up until you fall asleep and don't wake up. In the old world, a cheap detector could warn you. In the new world, you're the detector, and your alarm system is faintly feeling weird right before you die. Caves also rot you in slower ways. That constant cool temperature sounds friendly until you realize constant means constant. Your body thrives on cycles. Day warmth, night cool. Seasonal shifts. In dampstone, the humidity can be brutal. Clothes don't dry. Bedding becomes a mold project. Small cuts and abrasions stay wet and heal poorly. Your joints ache. Your morale slides. And the darkness, real darkness, the kind that swallows time, can unravel your sense of day and night. People become irritable, depressed, paranoid. You don't need monsters in the cave. The cave is enough. So, what do you use instead? If you need stone cover without stone poison, you look for places that don't trap air. Rock overhangs. Shallow shelters with at least 2 open sides. You want airflow and light. You want ground that isn't layered in ancient droppings and wet organic matter. If you must occupy anything cave adjacent, your first job is to assess ventilation like your life depends on it. Because it does. Watch how smoke behaves from a tiny test fire outside first. Feel for consistent air movement. If the air feels still deep inside, that's not cozy. That's a warning label. And here's a modern world satire you can actually use. If the location would make a great cozy aesthetic video for a TikToker, leave. The algorithm loves vibes. The apocalypse punishes vibes. You're not trying to find the prettiest shelter. You're trying to avoid the shelter that quietly kills you while letting you feel clever. The new world doesn't reward comfort, it rewards correct paranoia. Because the next trap doesn't look like a bunker. It looks like paradise. And it's going to convince you that you can finally breathe again. You leave the cave idea behind, which is the first sign you might live long enough to develop opinions about canned peaches again. You keep moving, staying out in open air, telling yourself that exposure is safer than enclosure. Even though your sheltered little mammal brain hates it, wind feels like vulnerability. Wind is also ventilation. In this world, ventilation is the closest thing you have to healthcare. Then, the landscape changes. The gray, broken teeth of suburbia thin out. The smell of melted plastic fades. You stop stepping around shattered glass and start stepping around green. A park, a golf course, a broad, manicured stretch of grass with trees planted in tidy patterns, a pond reflecting the sky like nothing ever happened. Ducks or geese might still be out there, doing their smug little circles like they didn't get the memo about civilization ending. The whole place looks like a postcard from the before times. And your body reacts before your brain does. Your shoulders drop, your breathing slows, your attention stops scanning every window and alley. This is why it kills you. Green space triggers a primitive, deeply wired signal. Water, food, safety, stability. To your nervous system, it's a promise. To the truth, it's a chemical museum exhibit titled, "What Humans Dumped on the Ground to Impress Other Humans." Because that grass didn't get that green by being loved. It got that green by being managed like a fragile celebrity. Parks and golf courses are not nature. They are theatrical productions. They only look calm because they're constantly being chemically bullied into behaving. For decades, a lot of maintained turf was treated with herbicides, fungicides, insecticides, and soil amendments that were never meant to be part of anyone's survival plan. Some older management practices used arsenic-based compounds, especially in the era when environmental safety was mostly a slogan printed on pamphlets. Even when regulations changed and certain products were phased out, the legacy of what was used didn't just vanish. Heavy metals don't politely evaporate because you've entered your rugged, self-reliant era. They bind to soil. They persist. They wait. And modern turf care didn't become gentle. It became complicated. A rotating schedule of synthetic chemicals designed to kill weeds, kill fungus, kill insects, and keep a monoculture alive. Monoculture is the key word. That beautiful lawn is one species over acres, which is basically the ecological equivalent of putting all your money into one stock and then being shocked when the market crashes. In nature, monocultures fail. They attract pests, disease, and stress. The only reason they survive is constant intervention. Intervention that no longer exists, which means the grass is already dying just slowly enough to fool you. And all the chemical history embedded in that soil is still there long after the people who applied it have turned into stories or ash. The pond is the next part of the trick. Water looks like salvation. In survival logic, water is life. In contaminated land logic, water is a collection system. Every rainfall, every irrigation cycle, every runoff event pushes whatever is on that land into the lowest point. The pond is the lowest point. So what you're seeing is not clean water with ducks. It's a diluted soup of decades of lawn care decisions. You drink it anyway because it's clear and you're thirsty and your brain is still operating like a pre-collapse tourist. Your kidneys do their best. Your liver does its best. Then the best stops being enough. The damage won't announce itself with a dramatic cinematic collapse. It will show up as fatigue that never goes away, nausea you blame on stress, headaches you call dehydration, trembling hands you interpret as adrenaline. You'll keep drinking it because symptoms come late and denial comes early, and then you get ambitious. This is the most human part. You look at all that open land and you start thinking like a settler. You imagine farming. You imagine stability. You imagine rebuilding. The park whispers, "You can stop running now." So you clear some grass. You plant potatoes, carrots, beets root vegetables because they're hearty, calorie-dense, and feel like the sensible apocalypse choice. And root vegetables are also experts at pulling things out of soil. That is literally what they do. They absorb nutrients, they absorb water. They also absorb contaminants and concentrate them in the part you eat. That's the farming trap. The soil looks rich because it grew grass, but it grew grass in a maintained space means it grew grass under chemical life support. Your little garden becomes a slow delivery poison dispenser. You harvest food that looks perfect and you eat it with pride, which is a special kind of tragic. Chemical poisoning in this context is cruel because it doesn't teach you quickly. Natural poisons usually come with immediate consequences. Eat the wrong mushroom, your body starts arguing with your life choices within hours. You learn fast or you die fast. Heavy metals and persistent pollutants don't play that fair. They accumulate, they stack. Your body can't purge them at the same rate you're consuming them. Every exposure adds weight to the total burden. By the time the consequences are obvious confusion, tremors, organ dysfunction, you are months in. You've invested labor, you've built routines. You've convinced yourself this is home. Now leaving feels impossible, and staying feels normal. That's how a beautiful park becomes a long-term execution you administer to yourself. Now, there is a practical survival skill here, not just a horror story. You have to learn to read land like a crime scene. The prettiest land is often the most tampered with. The places humans kept nice are the places humans also kept managed, which means sprayed, treated, fertilized, and engineered. You want the opposite. You want ugly. You want overgrown lots where weeds have staged a successful coup. You want abandoned field edges where brush is reclaiming space. You want places nobody cared about enough to maintain. Weeds are not the enemy in a collapse. Weeds are evidence. They mean nobody fought nature here with chemicals for decades. They also mean biodiversity, which is a rough indicator that the ecosystem still functions. Worms in the soil, insects moving, mixed plant types, these are signs of land that hasn't been chemically sterilized. And if you need water, you prioritize moving water over still water whenever possible. Streams with obvious flow dilute contamination better than ponds that concentrate it. Even then, you treat everything as suspect. In a collapse, clear is not the same as clean. The old world trained you to trust appearance because filtration, plants, and regulation existed. Now, your filtration plant is whatever you can improvise, and your regulation is whatever kills you first. Here's a new piece to add, because the apocalypse is not just chemistry, it's psychology. Your biggest enemy in a green space is relief. Relief makes you sloppy. The moment you feel safe, you stop checking. You stop questioning. You stop noticing the subtle signs of danger. Your brain goes into finally mode. Finally rest. Finally water. Finally a plan. That emotional shift is a vulnerability. You should treat relief like you treat hunger. Acknowledge it, but don't let it drive the vehicle. And speaking of vehicles, let's talk about the third trap, the one that looks like the last remaining map you can trust. Infrastructure. Specifically, railway lines and tunnels. You find the tracks and your brain does that beautiful, modern human thing where it mistakes a path for a plan. Tracks mean direction. Tracks mean you won't get lost. Tracks mean you can move efficiently without bushwhacking through brush that hides ankle-breaking holes and people with bad intentions. If you were raised in a world of GPS and street signs, a railway feels like a lifeline drawn across the landscape. Then you see a tunnel, and your exhausted mind has a religious experience. Concrete walls, cover from rain, flat ground, concealment, a place to sleep where the wind won't chew your bones, a place that feels engineered and therefore dependable. Except tunnels are not comfort. Tunnels are physics experiments with lethal outcomes. A tunnel connects 2 points. Those points almost always have different temperatures, different pressure, different wind exposure. Air moves from high pressure to low pressure. Warm air rises, cold air sinks. Put all of that into a long tube, and you get airflow that can be steady, fast, and directional. This is why chimneys work. It's also why tunnels can become wind machines. The stack effect turns a tunnel into a channel that accelerates air movement. That matters because smoke and fumes don't disperse in a tunnel the way they disperse outdoors. Outside, smoke rises and spreads. In a tunnel, smoke gets trapped and pushed. It becomes a delivery system. A fire at one end, yours, someone else's. A smoldering patch of vegetation near an entrance can sends smoke through the tunnel in concentrated waves. You may not even know the fire exists. You just start getting sleepy. And the part that ends stories is carbon monoxide. It's odorless. It binds to hemoglobin more effectively than oxygen does. Your blood becomes a taxi for poison. You feel tired, confused, maybe oddly calm. You sit down, you fall asleep, you don't wake up. It's not dramatic, it's administrative. Now add the second tunnel problem, the one modern people rarely think about until they've made the mistake. Treated wood, railway ties. Those convenient slabs of wood under the rails that look like free firewood provided by the universe. They are not free. They are expensive in a currency you can't afford. Many railway ties were treated to resist rotten insects for decades. That treatment often involves creosote, a tar-derived chemical mixture full of compounds you do not want in your body. It can irritate skin, it can irritate lungs, it can cause burns and long-term health effects. It also off-gases over time, especially in warmer conditions. So even if you don't burn the ties, you may be breathing their vapor in a confined space. But of course you burn them, because you're cold and desperate, and the tunnel is dark. You light one and the smoke is wrong, immediate lacrid, chemical, industrial. By the time your brain registers this seems bad, your lungs have already taken the first payment. Burning treated wood can release a toxic cocktail. And remember the tunnel's airflow? The tunnel doesn't just trap smoke, it distributes it. You can move away from the fire, but you can't outrun a tube full of poison. And while you're choking on your own ingenuity, the tunnel adds a structural risk as a bonus feature. Many tunnels are old. They were designed with the assumption of inspection, maintenance, repair. Water infiltration cracks concrete. Freeze-thaw cycles widen those cracks. Rebar corrodes. Sections weaken. In the old world, engineers monitored that. In your world, nobody is coming. Failure can be sudden. One moment you're asleep, the next you're buried under a century-old ceiling that finally gave up. So what do you do instead? If tunnels and enclosed infrastructure are a trap, you choose high ground. Ridgelines. Exposed areas with visibility and airflow. Your shelter-seeking instincts hate it because it feels open, and open feels vulnerable. But open also gives you information. You can see threats. You can smell changes in air. You're not trapped in a tube. You have exits in every direction. In the new world, concealment can be a hazard because it concentrates the invisible killers. Exposure, used intelligently, is a defense. Wind is not your enemy. Stagnant air is your enemy. And now, the thread tying all of this together becomes painfully clear. The places that look safe are often safe only in the old world context, where invisible systems made them safe. Without those systems, what remains is the shell-end. The shell is not protection. It's a trap you can sleep inside. So now you've got a pattern, and patterns are the closest thing to religion left. Caves, parks, tunnels 3, places your pre-collapse brain wants to trust. 3 places that will quietly erase you without ever raising their voice. None of them are evil. None of them are booby-trapped by a movie villain in tactical gear. They're just environments where biology, chemistry, and physics do what they've always done, only now there's no one left to buffer you from the consequences. That's the real betrayal of the new world. It punishes assumptions that used to be reasonable. You used to live inside a safety net you didn't see. The restaurant looked clean because inspections existed. The neighborhood felt safe because lighting, policing, and social norms still functioned. The tunnel didn't collapse because someone with a hard hat had a checklist. The park didn't poison you because you weren't drinking the pond and farming the lawn like a pioneer with a death wish. In the old world, appearance and reality matched often enough that you could live your life without analyzing every surface like it was trying to murder you. Now, that correspondence is broken. The cave that looks like shelter can be a gas chamber that works on geological time. The park that looks like Eden can be a slow chemical ambush. The tunnel that looks like infrastructure can become a smoke cannon and a toxic wood sauna and a collapsing concrete coffin, all at once, because the universe is apparently a fan of efficiency. And here's the part that matters. This isn't only about these 3 locations. It's about how you make decisions when the enemy is invisible and the feedback loop is delayed. The collapse didn't just remove comfort. It removed the mechanisms that prevented the environment from punishing you for being casual. So, you need a new framework, something you can run automatically when you're tired, hungry, and one bad choice away from becoming a cautionary tale. When you approach an enclosed space, your first questions can't be, is it dry, or can I defend it? Your first questions have to be, what accumulates here, and what can I not sense? Gases, spores, smoke, off-gassing chemicals, stale air. The apocalypse is full of threats that don't roar, they just linger. When you approach a beautiful green space, you stop seeing fertile and start seeing managed history. Who maintained it? What did they apply? Where does the water drain? What happens when rain concentrates everything into the lowest point? In a survival scenario, you're not looking for pretty. You're looking for boring, neglected, and biologically active. When you approach built infrastructure, you stop seeing solid and start seeing aging. What materials were used? Were those materials treated? Does the structure rely on maintenance to remain stable? Can air move freely? Or is it trapped? Are you about to sleep in a place that concentrates fumes, smoke, or collapse risk? If you can't answer, you assume the answer is bad, because that assumption keeps you alive. Now, let's add the 10% new material you actually need. Because it's one thing to know what not to do, It's another thing to do something smarter while your body is screaming for rest. First, learn to treat wind as data. Wind direction tells you where smells travel, where smoke would go, and whether an area is likely to accumulate gases. A spot that always feels dead, still especially low ground. Hollows. Depressions can be a trap for heavier than air gases. You don't need a lab. You need observation. Even simple cues help. Hang a strip of cloth, watch it, toss a pinch of dry dust, and see how it moves. If air is stagnant in a place that feels sheltered, that's not shelter. That's a container. Second, understand the psychological trap of finally. The moment you think you've found the spot, you're at maximum risk of making dumb decisions. Modern society trained you to think in endpoints: home, destination, finish line. In survival, there is no finish line. There is only better than where I was and not actively killing me. If you catch yourself fantasizing about settling, building, and decorating, pause. That's your brain trying to soothe itself with permanence. Permanence is a luxury item. You can't afford it until you can verify safety. Third, take disaster response thinking seriously. The old world's emergency professionals used a basic principle. You don't commit to a scene until you've assessed hazards and established exits. That applies to everything now. Before you bed down anywhere, you should have at least 2 exit routes you can take quickly, even in darkness. If you can't leave fast, you're not choosing a shelter. You're signing a lease with the unknown. Now, what do you choose instead of caves, parks, and tunnels? You aim for locations that balance cover with airflow, visibility with defensibility, and dryness with escape. Rock overhangs instead of deep caves, ridgelines instead of tunnels. Neglected, biodiverse land instead of manicured green spaces. Not because these options feel comforting, but because they reduce the categories of invisible hazards that can silently accumulate around you. And yes, ridgelines are exposed. Exposure feels scary because modern life trained you to treat comfort as safety. But comfort is now a baited hook. Exposure, managed properly, gives you 3 things you can't buy anymore: information, ventilation, and flexibility. Information means you can see threats coming and leave before you're boxed in. Ventilation means gases, spores, and fumes don't concentrate into lethal doses. Flexibility means you can move in any direction without being funneled like cattle into a tunnel or pinned in a single cave entrance. Now, I can already hear the imaginary comments section forming. But what about hiding from people? What about rain? What about winter? Sure, weather still matters. People still matter. But the hierarchy has shifted. A little discomfort doesn't kill you. Invisible exposure does. And there's a crucial distinction here. You don't have to be fully exposed. You have to be uncontained. You can build concealment that breathes. You can pick terrain that breaks up sightlines without sealing you into a gas trap. You can camp behind natural windbreaks, among trees, below ridges, but not in low bowls. You can use camouflage and discipline instead of crawling into a hole where the air itself is plotting against you. This is where modern satire becomes practical advice. If your shelter choice resembles what an influencer would pick for a cozy off-grid reset, you're probably about to be the main character in a medical case study that no longer has medical professionals. In the old world, aesthetic choices had low stakes. In the new world, aesthetic choices can be fatal, because the pretty places were often created by long-term manipulation. The messy places were left alone. Left alone is good. Let's stitch the lessons together so your brain can carry them when you're exhausted. Caves tempt you with primal shelter, but they can trap radon, harbor fungal pathogens from bat colonies, and create damp, dark conditions that degrade your body and mind. The deeper and more enclosed the cave feels, the more it should scare you, because the same enclosure that blocks wind and eyes also blocks the safety mechanism of dispersion. Parks and golf courses tempt you with open space and water and fertility, but they represent long-term chemical management. Soil contamination and runoff into ponds can create a slow poisoning loop through water, fish, and crops, especially root crops, that concentrate what the soil contains. The cleaner it looks, the more likely it was maintained, and the more likely it carries a chemical history you don't want inside your organs. Railway tunnels tempt you with structure and direction, but they are airflow accelerators that can concentrate smoke and carbon monoxide. They also house treated materials like creosote-soaked ties that off-gas and become catastrophic when burned. and they are aging structures that relied on inspection and repair, which are now extinct professions. In every case, the trap works because it appeals to an instinct that used to be adaptive. Shelter-seeking, green-seeking, infrastructure-trusting. Those instincts kept your ancestors alive. They kept you alive in the old world. And now they can kill you because the threat landscape has changed. So here's your upgraded survival software, the thing you run before you commit to a spot. Appearances are no longer correlated with safety. They are correlated with history. They tell you what a place used to be, not what it is now. The more maintained a place looks, the more likely it depends on systems that are failing. The more enclosed a place feels, the more likely it accumulates things you can't sense. The more engineered a place looks, the more likely it was designed with assumptions that no longer hold. That is the difference between survivors and bones. Survivors distrust the obvious. And if you're still craving a neat motivational ending, here it is. As bleak as it needs to be, your goal isn't to find the perfect shelter. Your goal is to avoid the perfect-looking trap. You don't win by getting comfortable. You win by staying mobile, staying skeptical, and choosing locations that reduce invisible risks, even when they don't satisfy your inner caveman or your inner suburban homeowner. Because in this world, everyone else is chasing the same obvious solutions. They're heading for caves, green parks, and tunnels, like moths heading for a porch light. The people who last are the ones who understand why those places feel safe and why that feeling is the lie. Learn or don't. Adapt or don't. Just don't act shocked when your brilliant shelter turns into the quietest grave you've ever seen.